Hi, Nathan. You can hear me, yeah? Welcome.
Hello. Hi. Yes, I can hear you.
Good.
Thank you. You can also hear me, right?
Yeah. Sorry. Sorry for not acknowledging.
Okay.
Yeah, while we are waiting others to join, maybe you can record your attendance on the meeting minutes we have, so we know.
On the HackMD, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I will do.
And I put the link to chat, and since the daylight saving times ended in Europe, things a bit tricky this week, so we will wait 2-3 more minutes for people to join.
Yeah, sure.
Hi, Matthias.
Hi. I thought I would be late, but I wasn't.
No, we are one of the first ones. Always this week between the daylight saving time starts or ends, it's always tricky because like Europe and US, they are not synced when they end or start or end the daylight saving time. So it is, we'll see. We hope we get more people. So, yeah, while we wait, you can put your name on the HackMD document so we know who is here. And then we can wait a few more minutes to give people time.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
How's everybody
Hello.
doing?
Hello.
You can see my screen, yeah?
Yes.
Good. So even though we have this daylight saving time, I think we have like good attendance, so we can maybe start in a minute. So let's start by going through agenda. So as usual, we start with the action item review, followed by a reminder on daylight saving time again, so we don't miss people for the next meeting because US is ending daylight saving time this weekend. And a quick update regarding this CI/CD industry workshop, which took place last weekend as part of IEEE software testing conference. There is some good questions and feedback from there, which I want to bring them here. Standardized metadata is the major topic which we started talking about during the last meeting. And we can spend a few minutes on the white paper actually, because it is better we focus on metadata this meeting. So we get started with that, and we can follow up the white paper offline as well. And then for the second half of the meeting, we will have demo from James Rawlings and James Strachan on Jenkins X and techno integration. And if you have any topics you want to raise, you can add them to the list, and we see if we have time for those. So the first action item is on you, Tracy, to come up with proposed time plan for interop white paper. Did you have any chance to think about this?
Yes, so what we did is just have a sync with the creative team, and they just gave us some guidelines as to what they need to kind of turn it into a CDF templated white paper. And it seems pretty straightforward for this one, because I think we're not planning to have any specific infographics, or maybe a couple of tables, but it's mostly just text. So with that in mind, I think they're pretty open. I would suggest we aim to get this done definitely before the end of the year, and ideally away from December. So I think CDF is doing annual reports and things like that. So we have some time used up there from the creative team. So what I'd suggest is by the end of November, we're in a state that we'll take that to the creative team, have them mock it up, and then one round of reviews, and then we're good to go. How does that sound?
End of November, yeah, to get it to the creative team. Okay, good. End of. Okay. Thanks for this, Tracy. So we covered part of the topic as well. So I mark this as done. And the other action item was on me, adding the metadata topic for this meeting, which I have done already, and it is in the agenda. And those were the only two action items. So the next topic is daylight saving time, as I've been talking about this last 5 minutes. So as you know, Europe already ended daylight saving time last weekend. So for the people joining from Europe, the meeting happens 1 hour earlier, and the US and Canada, perhaps the daylight saving time ends this weekend. So yet another change for the people coming from North America. So like how it happened to Europe, you will need to join the meeting 1 hour earlier than what it is now, because we agreed to stick to UTC 3 p.m. at the very first meeting. So please ensure you join at the right time so you don't miss the meeting. And I use this time is website which kind of shows 3 p.m. UTC on different time zones. So it is 8 a.m. now for Pacific time, and next meeting will be 7 a.m., which is kind of a bit early, but unfortunately, that's what we...
What time will the next meeting be in Eastern time?
Let me
just
try.
Be 2 hours off Pacific.
ET, and it worked. So Eastern time. Today it is 11 a.m., yeah?
Yes.
And next time it will be 10 a.m. then.
Okay, great.
So let me put that link here. So
and
that's
just
yeah.
For awareness, I just want to mention, because next week at the same day we also have kind of the CDF end user council meeting. I was trying to work out if they were clashed, and I think they don't, because I think the end user council meeting is effectively after the interop one. So.
Okay. So since this goes 1 hour earlier, then there will be 1 hour between, maybe, if you are following Pacific time for end user. So it's all this time zone thing is like confusing me twice a year. But anyway, you have the link there, and the reminder will be in the meeting minutes and agenda as well for next time. So please keep an eye on those mails. And the next topic, this CI/CD industry workshop happened over the weekend, and let me open the link. And I found out this workshop thanks to Emil. He pointed this to me at the beginning of this year, and we proposed a talk for this workshop on interoperability, and our talk got accepted, but then coronavirus happened, and originally this workshop was supposed to happen March or something. It got delayed to October last weekend and turned into virtual. So in the end, it happened, and it was actually a great luck that we found those people, because there are many people who are talking about CI/CD testing from academy and industry perspective. And I simply presented the interoperability topic and talked about continuous delivery foundation, and there was a great response to continuous delivery foundation, especially because some of those people weren't so really aware of the existence of continuous delivery foundation, unfortunately. But in the end, we found each other, and I got them in touch with Tracy. So Tracy will have a meeting with them, I suppose, next week to, you know, somehow socialize collaboration idea and so on. And in addition to that, they asked few questions or raised few ideas. One of the ideas they raised was the availability of maturity model for companies to evaluate themselves from continuous delivery perspective. And this could be something CDF could perhaps take a look at. So I'm just bringing that here. And Tracy, any comments on that?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I was trying to send Zoom links to.
Yeah, the continuous delivery maturity model, they were asking, you know, companies could.
Okay, yes. So a couple of thoughts on that. So we're about to spin up a best practices working group, and it's on my backlog. So there's a charter that the strategy committee and at the board level is pretty happy with. Michael Galloway from Netflix is kind of captured this vision, and the summary is, you know, we want to base things on the Accelerate book, and we want to work out how people can get better, and we give them that way of doing it. I don't want to call anything maturity model because it's got all sorts of bad connotations, but in this general idea that you figure out where you are on different things, and then you work out what the next stage is to improve, and whatever we call that, perhaps not maturity model, but something that is easy to understand. I think that will be what that group will be aiming to do. And I expect at the next talk meeting that we'll be able to share that and have a wider discussion with everybody.
Okay, thanks. The other question they raised was like what we have been talking last few weeks as part of our white paper and as part of our meetings, like they don't really, you know, have a common understanding or shared understanding when it comes to CI, continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment, which this work is already happening. So we are kind of in line with what other people may be thinking. So that is already happening. So let me add that as note. So it is needed somehow we make this challenge visible. Another question was on standardization. They asked like if there's any standards in place or who does this type of stuff. And I again highlighted CDF as a place to talk about these things. I'm not saying like CDF is a standards developing organization, but they could join and take part in the effort here. What we get in the end remains to be seen. And the other point was about how to get some collaboration going on between academia, industry, and communities. And my response was same, come and join CDF, take part. So, and I leave this to you, Tracy, since you will meet with them. So,
yeah, happy to follow up with them. As a general point for academia, just invite them to join any of our working groups. And if they want kind of to get like a badge of honor for joining, they can be associate members of CDF, and all they have to do is say why they want to join. We take that to the board gives a thumbs up, and then we put them on the website to say, hey, we're doing that. We just did that with our first university, which is a university in China, actually. So if that's of interest to folks, let them know they can do that, and just drop me an email with a contact point to get that done.
Tracy,
Yep.
This is Steve. When you talk to these folks at the universities, one of the things that we're looking for on the Ortelius side is open source projects that are running under Kubernetes for our marketplace. So if you can poke around on that topic, that would be great.
Sure, sounds good. I will ask for that.
And these people, or these people seem to have been running this software engineering and programming languages journal club. Maybe Christy, you may have heard this, because it is driven, like one of the guys who are organizing this is from Google, I think Tim Henderson. And I will put the link to the meeting minutes. You see there are lots of papers here, and it is like public papers which you can go and read and comment. It seems they have been doing this for quite a while, and some of those papers are pretty relevant to what we are talking, both in the SIG and within Continuous Foundation. So it would be good to see what they are talking about. And they have a Google group as well, where they are like announcing which paper is available on that Google site and collecting feedback. So it is kind of getting ourselves connected with academia as well. And they are having meetings once every month, if I am not mistaken. So you can see those details from these two links. So it was great in the end. Yeah.
Do we know if they're not focused specifically on like continuous delivery, though? They're like just generally kind of sharing and reading papers. Is that right? Or are they focused on continuous delivery type topics?
I think when I met with them during the workshop, the focus was on CI/CD, like continuous integration, continuous delivery, and they have slight interest on testing as well. So
yeah,
like,
I heard testing in this context, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's like maybe 50 papers or 30 papers. So it's like hitting gem. Okay. So any questions on this topic? Okay, we can move to the next topic, and I want to pass the word to James Strachan, if you are ready, James.
Hello, I'm ready.
Okay.
I'll share my screen.
Let me stop share.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I stopped.
I've got I've got a couple of slides, just a few, and then I've got a little demo. The slides are really just for a bit of context. I'll put the slides in the chat as well, just in case there's any links on there people want to noodle.
James, sorry, we are on actually this metadata topic.
Oh, okay. Okay, not that, I'm wrong topic. I'll stop sharing.
Sorry for confusion.
That's okay.
But again, this is on you as well, because you brought up this topic during the last meeting. So if you can just, and then you can continue with Tecton and Jenkins X as well.
Okay, I don't have a huge amount to add. It's on me. I guess I need to write up a proposal and describe it in more detail. But various conversations the last couple of years have happened between, for example, Jenkins X people and Spinnaker people in the Jenkins community. We all seem to be doing releases, and we've never really defined the common metadata format for what a release looks like. So we should probably just start a spec and try come up with some common metadata that we can all agree on, and then we can start integrating it into Tecton, Jenkins X, Spinnaker, Jenkins. That's pretty much all I have.
Anyone else who wants to talk about this topic?
When you talk about metadata and giving it to other services, is there an idea of how to transport this metadata, or is just how the metadata is structured?
It's a good question. So I was focused initially on just defining the metadata first, particularly with kind of, after using Kubernetes for a few years, how data arrives on disk via CRD, via REST API, via command line call, via message broker, via database, via file system, via bucket. Rather than worrying about the actual transfer and transport and API, let's focus on the data first and make something that looks like a CRD. It doesn't have to be a CRD. It could be a custom resource in Kubernetes. It could just be a blob of YAML. It could be a message in a message broker. It could be on Kafka. It could be in the API server in Kubernetes, or it could just be on the file system or something. But start with just the data first. And then once we have an agreed data format, we could make a REST API. Maybe we could store them on a bucket. We could, whatever. In the Jenkins X project, we went for the CRD route, which is useful, but then actually turned out to cause some problems, because if a custom resource into your like a Kubernetes application, you can install it in a cluster that doesn't have that installed. There's now a fix for that in Helm, where you can say, oh, install this resource if you have this custom resource in your cluster. So you can bake CRDs into Helm charts, and they don't install if the CRD isn't installed. But yeah, it doesn't need to be a custom resource. It could just be a file in Git somewhere with an annotation that points to it. It could be just a URL somewhere on a website. It could be a message bus. I think all of those are useful. But I figured let's just start somewhere with like just a spec, like a schema, some examples that we can start make. I think the first thing is to start generating this data as part of release pipelines and whatnot. Then eventually tooling might want to discover that metadata. If you've got a promotion tool, you might want to look at the metadata to say, do you really want to release 1.2.3? It's got a backwards or compatible change or whatever. We can start baking the metadata in so people understand what's being fixed, what's not fixed, what issues there are, what, linking to release notes and GitHub change logs and that note. So I thought, let's start really simple and small. Let's define some metadata first. See how much is common between, say, Spinnaker, Flagger, and Jenkins X or something, 3 random projects. And then just see how many other people are doing something similar, and does anybody else want to join in, and has got different ways of thinking about it. There's overlaps. Helm kind of has some of this data in the Helm chart. I mean, not everybody uses Helm, but we should maybe align with that. There's also the app standard, the app spec as part of Kubernetes that we should kind of align with, but this was not intended to be technolithic, as in it shouldn't matter if using Helm or Kept or kubectl or Spinnaker or Jenkins, but we should be able to come up with a lot of common stuff. Like, there's only so many ways of saying where the Git URL is and what the Git jar is, and where's the URL to the pipeline log if there was one, and those kind of things. So we should be able to come up with something simple-ish early, I would have hoped, and then just see what happens, really. See who joins in and uses it.
Good morning, James. I'm just struggling a little bit about what your problem statement is. Are you, just please correct me, are you advocating for an application metadata standard or a release metadata standard, something that's closer to a release metadata standard?
A bit of both. I guess the use case is, a bit of both, but the basic idea is, what can we bake into of applications so that consumers who are doing progressive delivery or rolling upgrades or using some kind of continuous delivery tool can use that metadata to understand what will happen if they go forward. So if there's any kind of human approval or any kind of manual process involved with people, it's useful to give people information to help to choose. For example, if you go from 1.0 to 2.0 and there's a million backwards breaking changes, you might not want to click the approve button in Spinnaker at 5 p.m. on a Friday. because you've seen your upgrade and there's backwards and compatibility issues, and there's a big warning in the release notes that only do this on the Tuesday or whatever. Right? So it's more, how can we bake in that metadata so if there's any humans involved in the chain, they can easily find information, however they're consuming it. They might be consuming it via a shell script, via a blob of Kubernetes YAML, via a Helm chart.
Let me give you what's been one of the things that I like about what eBay has done. They did this years ago when it came to controlling of what actually gets deployed and what gets released, is that they created the concept of a manifest. At eBay, you don't ever, we don't speak of deploying software. We speak of deploying manifests. It's the manifest that has in it everything about what's being deployed, including, and now over the last year and a half or so, we're also including in the, we're linking with the manifest things like all the information about the quality gates. What, in fact, I designed this about a year ago, and we're fairly good way through of implementing it, and I came up with a badge system, meaning the quality gates itself is an object that gets associated with the manifest that has all the release information in it, that includes a series of badges. These badges are, if for the manifest, for this thing you're about to deploy, you are given, this manifest is awarded badges such as unit tests pass, integrations tests pass, our security scan passes, our dynamic scans pass. I mean, there's a number of different badges that gets awarded to this manifest. These badges are examined at the time admission controllers are about to allow this thing in to get deployed. So all the quality gate stuff gets wrapped up in this quality gates object, which is associated with these badges, which then gets all associated with this manifest. It sounds to me like that's the kind of thing you're talking about. A manifest, an object that encompasses all the information about a release, a particular release of a piece of software, some snapshot of it in Git or your repository. Is that about right?
Yes, that sounds exactly right. Yes, totally agreed.
Okay. Does the concept of a manifest sound, a release manifest sound good to people here?
Yeah.
So that's well, this is Steve from Deploy Hub. We have the Ortelius project that we're looking to get into the CDF, and one of the things that we are doing is something very similar, where we have, like you said, a manifest that is defining what a release looks like, and that metadata is stored in a database. And what ends up happening is you have a manifest per version of your application. And when you're dealing with the microservices world, you end up with many, many versions of an application. They all may not make it to production, but when you're coming out of the CI process and they're being independently deployable, we still have to associate them up into a version of an application. So that's stuff that we are tracking at a manifest level. Like you're saying, James, it's a pointer. We're using pointers to the data instead of storing the data itself. So, where's the Git repo? Where's the Docker repo? Those type of things are just pointers that were associated together in that manifest. Now, there's one thing that came to mind was there are some standards around packaging, and I can't remember. I thought it was a SPF was the standard, but I couldn't find it. But there's a standard that somebody was working on to say this is how you basically sign your package, so you know that this is where it came from. those type of things. We may want to look at those, earlier on when things are getting built and packaged, how they're getting signed, to make sure that we know from there tracking back to where it came from as well, what would be important. I wish I could remember the name of that standard. It's just escaping me right now.
There is, I know that there's a Tecton project called Chains that I think is sort of related to what you're talking about. And there's another tool that is similar that I also can't remember the name of, that might be the one that you're thinking of. It's gone. I feel like it was something, it was not like a well-known word. It was like one of those like Greek words or something.
Yeah, and it was most of it I was seeing was on, what a package spec looks like was coming out of the Node.js world, because they have to deal with that a lot with all the dependencies. So looking at some of the Node.js dependencies and their specs may be useful to grab some ideas from.
Yeah, I like the idea of just adding a link. Like we went with a CRD in Jenkins X, and with hindsight, it wasn't awesome. It's lower friction just to add the URL as, say, an annotation. You can annotate images, you can annotate deployments, it's easy.
And then one of the things that we're looking at doing is, and it gets really complex really quick, but if you want to have, let's say you have a microservice container that's gone out to the QA cluster, who is the owner of that service? Where's the stack driver logs? What's the PagerDuty link? Those types of metadata are also interesting. But when you take that same service and it can be consumed by, if it's an open source service, it's being consumed by 5,000 companies, what does it mean then? That type of thing when you try to look backwards at it. But that's some of the other information I've seen people want is that type of metadata as well. Not only what's happened through the pipeline, but what's needed to support it once it gets to where it's going.
And where's its issue tracker if something fails?
Yeah, where is it? Jira? Is it GitHub? Is it GitLab? Those types of things, so people know when it breaks what to do with it or to go open an issue.
I mean, look, once you have an object that encapsulates the absolute basic data about what is being released, which is what eBay calls a manifest, a release manifest. Once you have that, then the possibilities open up to connect any number of things with it. Meaning you don't have to jam it into the release manifest. You can just associate it with the release manifest and leave a mechanism of sort of a customized data associated with this thing open for others to add to, so that you don't have to think about everything right now. You come up with the absolute basics of what everybody agrees what a release should include. Okay, there are a few, this body here that we have, all the people we have here on this forum, we can decide what that is and then say this is an extension mechanism, and you go forward from there. This is exactly how the manifest object, the release manifest object, got done at eBay.
And is that manifest object immutable then?
Once the manifest is created, the object itself, it is immutable. You have to create a new one.
Right. You never reuse a previous one.
Never. That is the golden rule. You do not modify. Manifests are created one time. It's a snapshot of a particular snapshot of a code base. That's what's being released. If there is changes required, you got to go through your process, which is automated, and create a new one.
Mm-hmm.
So Ramin, is that something like that you can share, kind of the structure of the manifest?
Yes. So let me do this. I will. In fact, we've had to create. There's the manifestation of a manifest.
I like
our previous, I know, really, getting wrapped up in words here. Of the previous manifestation of that is in an older database that we have. I can grab the pieces of data that go in there. It's a combination of packaging information. What do I need to get this piece of software running? All of its dependencies, as well as everything else that's associated with it, as I mentioned, having to do with its Git repo and all the other things that James just mentioned. Let me grab. In fact, that's already internally. I think for those of you who listened to my talk before, we have a internal implementation of Kubernetes at eBay. It's called test.io. We have a bunch of CRDs, tests related CRDs. This is one of them. So the release manifest is one of them. I'll grab that and I'll bring it to this forum next time so we can at least see it. This is the kind of stuff we're jamming into a release manifest.
Ramin, I am putting action on you then, Ramin, to bring an example from.
Once again, I created an action item for myself.
As usual.
That's cool.
So this is Steve. I just shared my screen of what we're capturing in Artelius coming out of the CI process. So we're looking at a component, which is one. This is the email service component that we're looking at, and like you're saying, where's the issues? Where's what chart's being used to deploy it? This is done on a Jenkins job. When was built, where is it pushed, all the SHA information. Like I said, we're going to be extending this out, but that's some of the basic stuff that we're looking at grabbing initially.
We've been asked to add things like the secrets vault. There's been a list of items that the open source community has started identifying what we need to add to that. And then we also have what I like to call a hermetic Helm chart. So when we run a deployment, we pull the Helm chart and then create an overrides file for all of the variable substitutions or key value pairs. And those key value pairs are defined based on a environment. Once it's generated, we go and we push that back up to our database so that if you ever wanted to redeploy that exact deployment, you can pull that that hermetic Helm chart out of our database and execute it. So we're thinking in the same lines as Ramin is talking about in terms of creating a what I like to call a hermetic manifest, I guess, or a hermetic Helm chart that has everything that's needed and it can't be changed.
That will be one thing that would need to be addressed in the proposal is how to deal with config maps and key value pairs, because you can have the same artifact being deployed deployed the same way, but the parameters passed in for runtime will make it act differently, and that data is crucial as well, because if something breaks in one environment versus another environment, and the only thing that's changed is maybe the replica set count or something like that, that's important information to know, even though it's exactly the same package. Just being what's being applied causes it to have a different behavior.
So apologies for interrupting, but I think this is a great discussion and it's a great start because I hear a consensus here. We can look at this as a group and continue exploring what is available, like what Ramin mentioned, what Steve and Tracy mentioned from Ortelius, and James already have some ideas. So we should definitely continue with this. And the question I want to ask is would it be good to identify 2-3 people to drive this topic forward, like how we are doing with events work stream? So we don't, we have someone to coordinate this effort. Do we have any?
So at the risk of volunteering, I'd be pretty interested in helping, let's list all these prior arts, let's compare things, and just happy to, I guess, product manage it a bit. That being said, not for the next kind of 2-3 weeks, but if we can keep kind of looking at things, having the discussions, I think I can get to a place where I can focus on it a bit more, but that's going to be a bit down the line.
Should we start with a little
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, should we start with a little discovery doc where we can all give examples of things? We could have the eBay example, we could have the deploy HUD example, we could put the Jenkins X, and just kind of say, here's all the things we're doing, which is kind of similar. And then we can all ponder what it all looks like and then start thinking what a straw man could look like of what we could maybe standardize on or something.
Yeah, I'll be happy to help with pulling that together. I think, like you said, James, we just need to get a straw man out there as a starting point and work from there. So I would say that would be the next action item, is to get a doc going.
Okay, so Tracy, Miranda, James, Stretch, and Steve Tyler, I put your names there, and I can create a hackathon document under SIG group, like next to events or this meeting minutes, and I can share the link with you so everyone can collaboratively edit that document.
Yep.
And
besides the prior arts that everyone's mentioned, and if you can put the links and capture them there, if everyone thinks about the kind of problem statements, like what are we trying to solve, let's list all those out. So when we come to scoping it, we can be clear about which problems we're trying to solve and address for users.
No, that when we have to be true developers and just randomly create stuff for no reason at all, and then figure out what it's used for.
I said I'm going to PM you.
Okay, so sorry. Now, as we discussed white paper at the beginning, so the only thing I want to highlight here is, like, do we have anyone who is interested in contributing case study here? I think, Oliver, if I am not mistaken, you mentioned you could do that. So any updates on it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We're currently in the process of reviewing some parts internally. Therefore, I guess we should be expecting something within the next 2 weeks there.
Okay, then I will sync with you offline.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I pointed someone, I think Sedat, who's at NatWest Group, and I think he's interested. I pointed him at the doc, but actually maybe it'd be better to make an intro to you so you can connect with him.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. I will look for your mail. And then let's spend the rest of the time for James' Tecton and Jenkins X presentation.
Oh, one more thing. One more thing. Hold it, Tim.
Okay.
Just a quick question, quick comment. I saw the mention of Waypoint the other week, and I reached out to the folks who are doing it, the PM for that, Jen Bryden used to work at Cloudbees. So yeah, pretty happy to sync with us. I've invited, she's going to try and sync with the team there and see if they can get 1 or 2 folks to come along and just present at this meeting, just more, what are they thinking in terms of developer experience, and then maybe we can kind of see how some of our efforts tie into what they're doing, because it looks kind of neat. So just so you know, once they get back to me, I'll connect them with Fatih and Kara to get them scheduled, but I let them know our 2 dates in November, and I told them they were free for now. So FYI.
So you said Waypoint, yeah? Yeah, okay. Tracy. Okay, thanks, Tracy. I put the note to agenda. So, James, finally.
Awesome. I might turn off my video actually, just because kids are at home using the internet and my bandwidth is terrible. Okay, I'm going to do a very brief background of how Jenkins X used to work with Tecton and how it's going to work with Tecton pipeline and catalog. In many ways, this has been a constant issue with CI/CD going back the last kind of 20 years, that we generally want to share pipelines and tasks across projects, but sometimes we want to change them. And everything changes all the time, so you have versioning issues. So this is a very common problem that Tecton is trying to address and Jenkins X has tried to address. And before it, Jenkins tried to address, and pretty much every CI tool at some point tries to address this problem of how do you share lots of complex metadata for what pipelines are and what tasks are across lots of repositories, and how do you change them over time? And what happened in the Jenkins ecosystem was eventually people realized that copying and pasting these massive Jenkins files from repository to repository wasn't awesome. And so this idea of shared pipeline library started. And then templating happened and all that kind of stuff. When we first started Jenkins X, we started before Tecton. So we ended up making this little kind of DSL for pipeline steps, which we generated to make Jenkins files. And then as soon as Knative came along, Knative build, we generated Knative build, and then Knative build pipeline came along, so we generated that. Then came along, we generated that. One of the aims of the Jenkins X YAML and the DSL was trying to make pipelines composable so that you can inherit pipelines from a shared library, but you can then override things. And we tried our best to make something that kind of worked, and we've kind of decided it's maybe not a great idea. So we're moving away from this in Jenkins V3, which I'll talk about in a second. But at the bottom of the slide, there's a little example that we can kind of say, I want to override a step in a pipeline. I'm going to give you the pipeline name and the step, and I'm just going to write exactly what the step is here. And generally speaking, writing a DSL on top of some complex YAML is a huge amount of effort and time, and it's kind of painful because, for example, Tecton changes very frequently, and new things happen in Tecton, and then you have to change your DSL, and you're constantly fighting with the DSL and Tecton. This kind of override mechanism and inheritance mechanism is actually kind of complicated. It's hard to understand and how to use. So we've generally decided it's not awesome, so let's do something else. So in Jenkins X v3, we've taken a slightly different tack that we've said, rather than trying to make a DSL that wraps Tecton, let's just use Tecton. So Tecton is the DSL now. It is the YAML standard for defining tasks and pipelines. And the main reason we want to do that is we want to make it really easy for anybody who has any Tecton tasks or pipelines to just use them. There's no need to wrap them or do any kind of weird things to them. We want to work well with Tecton catalog, where we can share tasks and pipelines with a Tecton catalog. And also we want to be able to share things that the Jenkins X community build with the wider Tecton ecosystem. But there is this requirement that we have very strongly in Jenkins X, which I know the Tecton folks have been looking at as well, is how do we support sharing pipelines and tasks across repositories, but being able to change them, right? It's all very well sharing pipelines and tasks, but then what happens if you want to change step 4 of the pipeline that does something? How do you do the change? So I'll just present very briefly what we've come up with. So, oh, by the way, these are the current state of the art in the Tecton community. We can share tasks across pipelines. So task sharing in Tecton is pretty much a solved problem. You can share referring to tasks by a name in Kubernetes. So you could have a name called git clone, and any pipeline can reference the git clone task by name, which is great. One of the downsides of that, though, is there's only one resource with that name. So then you have to put the version in the name, which is a little bit kind of weird in Kubernetes. There's a better approach in Tecton now called bundles, where you can refer to a task via a container image and tag, and hopefully soon a Git repository and shard. So rather than referring to just a name, you can use a name and a version, which is a really nice way of sharing an immutable image of a task. So that's for tasks. If you're sharing it without changing it. Sharing on pipelines is a little bit hard because usually you want to change them, right? I might want to inherit the pipeline for doing a release of, I don't know, Go or Spring Boot, but then I might want to change step 3 because I want to add some more memory, or I want to change a command line argument or something. Now, if ever you've read Brian Grant's document on declarative YAML for doing deployments and whatnot, this kind of rung pretty true. Read it about a year ago, and it kind of alarm bells went off when I thought of the Jenkins X DSL. And Google have made an open source project called Kept. It's spelled KPT but pronounced Kept, which is basically a tool for copying YAML files between repositories, but using Git and shard. So it's like a versioned copy of YAML, keeping a reference to the version that was copied, and allows you to upgrade over time to the new version, but also to keep changes and merge changes locally. So we kind of read that and thought, well, why don't we try, instead of having a DSL above Tecton, why don't we just use Tecton and use Kept to share Tecton pipelines across repositories? So this is a quick demo of looks like now. So this is a quick demo of a command in Jenkins X, which is called JX pipeline import. I'll just press play so you can see it work. So this is a command for sharing a Tekton task from the Tekton task catalog inside your repository. So it's a very quick demo. Just got a microservice here, and I'm going to share a task from the Tekton catalog. So I type JX pipeline import. It does a git clone of the Tekton catalog, which is just a Git repository with folders with versions of tasks inside. It gives you a little combo box thingy that lets you pick which kind of task you want to pick. And you can type to search as well. So we type a little bit and search, and we pick one. So we're going to use one of the NCF build packs here, and you hit return. And what it basically does is it uses the kept binary to do a git clone. Well, it's not quite a git clone, but it grabs from Git the tasks from that version that I want and copies them into my Git repository. It also does a lighthouse thing, which I don't need to talk about too much for this call, but it does a lighthouse thing that then enables triggering of that pipeline task whenever you pull request or you release. So we decide when we want to trigger this, or do we want to trigger it on releases, and then those are all the source files it's created. Now we just show you the source files. You don't need to worry what these look like. For those who know Tekton, you know what the Tekton pipelines look like. Those who don't know Lighthouse, don't worry about that. But this is the trigger configuration, which is a Lighthouse thing for enabling this Tekton task to be triggered. And then this is a Tekton task that we've shared from Git. Now, the main thing I want to talk about and show you really is this idea that by using kept, it gives us another tool in our armory for sharing Tekton tasks or pipelines across repositories. And we've been finding kept very useful at sharing all kinds of things, not just Tekton stuff. We're doing it for Helm charts and various other kind of things. Because the great thing is we could then share, for example, I've shared the build pack YAML. I could then share that YAML across 20 microservices. If any of those microservices want to change one of the steps in that task, they just edit the YAML directly in Git, its version. Each microservice then has its own version. And then separately, you can then upgrade those versions across the repositories however you wish. You could do a big bang, you could do an individual pull request on each microservice. Each microservice owner gets to choose when to go forwards or backwards. So it's a really simple tool. It's a really simple approach. It can be used in conjunction with all the existing Tekton reuse mechanisms. You can still use, immutable tasks versioned inside Git or inside image bundles, and you can totally use that if you wish. So you can choose to use that for tasks, or you can copy tasks into your Git repository. Where I see kept having its biggest use is reusing pipelines, which is something that the Tekton catalog hasn't particularly looked at terribly much yet. It's pretty much nailed reusing tasks. Pipelines are much harder because pipelines tend to be much more random and different between repositories. That's pretty much it. That's all I've got. Any questions on anything I've said so far?
What happens when the upstream changes? So let's say you have an upstream pipeline that this one's based on, and let's say you added in like a security scan into that pipeline. Will all the consumers of that pick that up automatically?
Yeah, well, not automatically. It's up to you to decide when to upgrade. So let's say you have version 1.0 of your pipeline. You can 2, and then by default, nothing happens. And then currently, if anybody is in a Git repository that they wish to change, you run this little command JX GitOps upgrade, and that will upgrade any shared pipeline YAML in your repository. So I might have shared a linter, container image task, and a pipeline that does promotion or something. I might have lots of different shared things. I can choose which thing to upgrade when. And kept manages, kept handles the deltas and the merge conflicts if there are any merge conflicts. I should backtrack slightly. Tekton has a composition model where a pipeline run can have one or more pipelines, and a pipeline can have one or more tasks, and a task can have one or more steps. So you already have this kind of tree of composition. Now, it could be if you're just changing one of your tasks, nothing else changes, you just upgrade that one task. So it's literally just a task version changes and you're good to go. So sharing change at the task level is really quite simple because tasks are often fairly easy just to reuse without changing them. The tricky bit and the bit that we prefer kept for is when a pipeline changes. For example, I might have 5 tasks that make up a pipeline, and I might choose to add a step in between those 3 tasks or something, or I might decide to remove a task or replace a task or configure a task differently or change the parameters that you use in the task or change a command line in step 4 of task 2. So we find pipelines are the place that you want to be able to just do whatever you need. Tasks are something that can be really shared, but you want to share a specific version of a task. So it's a fascinating area, this whole thing, because it's tricky, right? There's lots of different use cases and requirements. Sometimes people want to have one global view of a pipeline, and if that changes, they want to forcibly push that pipeline onto all microservices. Other people want to kind of take change when people are ready. So, you know, when you're ready, upgrade your pipeline to the latest version. Where we're going with Jenkins X at the moment is we're assuming we just generate pull requests to push changes down through all the different repositories. So that if you're an owner of a microservice, you choose when to merge the upgrade pull request, basically. So we automate the pull generation and you choose when to consume the pull request. A little bit like if ever you've used Dependabot on GitHub, Dependabot will generate pull requests when all your dependencies upgrade. We're kind of seeing pipeline changes as like that. It's one of your dependency has changed. Do you want to take the new version of the pipeline or not? And you choose when, kind of thing.
So we're having kind of similar discussions, not totally similar, but let me ask you if this is something that could potentially be used to solve this particular use case. So in Ortelius, we track a microservice as a component, and a component is related to an application. One microservice could impact X number of applications. So we want to start assigning risk values to microservices. We know how, you know, we could assign a risk value to what we call a domain because it uses a domain structure. And I think what we were supposed to, I think we should be on the agenda maybe for the next 2 weeks to do a demo of Ortelius so that this can be more clear. But we can create a domain. We have a domain structure for a domain-driven design. And we could assign a risk value to a domain. So let's say security is the domain. And let's say the microservice impacts 15 applications. That's going to have a very high risk level. Now, if we go at a lower level domain, let's say a website, and that website, the microservice we're dealing with is a front end, it's going to have a much lower level risk because it's not impacting anything but that one application team. What we want to be able to do is start creating smart workflows, like creating almost a truth table and say, for this level of security, it should go through this workflow. So the workflow has to have, can't have any data. The workflow has to be completely separate from the data, right? Because let's say, well, we just found out that every single time this team releases their front end, it breaks their application. We know that, and we can increase the risk value. So it should go from maybe a medium level security process. So we want to have more dynamic workflows that we only, you know, an organization could define, let's say, a set of 5 or 10 workflows that can be reused over and over and over, and Deploy Hub can determine what workflow based on the risk value it should go through.
That sounds interesting.
Could we use something like this
question.
Integration? Yeah.
Yeah.
So if a task is just reused around like hundreds of pipelines, do you expect, and as a task owner, is the onus on you to push out, say, there is a security vulnerability, right? So you fix it in the task and you still have to send out like hundreds of potentially pull requests to each of the downstream clients?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And this doesn't quite exist yet, but what would be awesome is if you are the consumer of something, and it doesn't matter if it's a Node library, a Go library, a Tecton task, or whatever, you're using a dependency. If there's a security fix in the upstream dependency, you should just get a pull request that says, you need to upgrade this, right? It's a security fix. If it's a new feature, well, you need to do your own pull request. But when it's pushing, you know, important bug fixes or security fixes, I'd rather have a pull request myself generated on all my projects by the upstream maintainer or whatever, or the ecosystem. So I would like that pull request automation to be a thing that's generic. We've started using Dependabot on a few projects, and Dependabot kind of does that, but it's very simplistic. For example, it doesn't say, you generate so many pull requests that you've got Dependabot pull requests everywhere you look. There's a million of them everywhere. What would be really nice if there was a way of saying, stop everything. It's a security update from Dependabot. Forget all those other million pull requests. This one, you should merge right now. So we need a way, a bit like the risk profile stuff. We need a way of like labeling pull requests and saying, we've generated a pull request, but it's high risk. It's probably going to break stuff. Or this is a highly important pull request. It's a security fix. You should probably get these merged like right away. So then you could look across all your pull requests and say, I'm going to merge the security fixes first before I do anything else. When it's we've done an upgrade because we've added some features, those kind of changes people can normally make their own mind up when they're going to take them. You know, you might decide to take a new version once a week, once a month, something. But security fixes should be done, you know, quickly, like really.
Yeah, so is there a way to specify kind of a tag or something to say, okay, this is a stable version or this is the latest version? So when I run my pipeline, just pull this always, because I'm coming from Screwdriver world and we have this notion of templates and commands where you can share solutions. So it supports version, but it also supports tags and even similar kind of format where you can just say, I want this template at version 2. So any patch versions or just gets pulled in automatically.
And part of what we were talking about earlier,
so good.
like Raman was saying, was with the manifest and the metadata, that's going to help drive this, because that's where you can get your relationships to know what the impact is and who's the consumers and who the producers are.
Yeah, there is the semantic versioning you can take into this, that you could say, you know, I'll always take patch versions of things quickly, but you know, major versions I'm going to really think about ever doing that, or you know, I'm going to slowly upgrade to the next major version when I choose. You know, I might schedule it every 6 months or something. But patch versions, I probably want to take them reasonably automatically. But even with patch versions, people are fixing bugs all the time, and that's fine. But I might not need a patch version unless I particularly want one. However, if a patch version has a security label on it, this is a patch, but it's a security fix, I might want to take those. So I think we almost want to, it's going back a bit like to the metadata discussion before. It'd be really nice if there was a way of saying this new version has a security fix in it. You should just upgrade because it's secure, versus this has got a bug fix in it and this is the bug fix. And you then choose, is that bug fix relevant to your use of that tool or not? Because there's a lot of bug fixes that you don't, they're not urgent, right? They're useful but urgent, but security fixes usually are fairly urgent. And it'd be nice to be able to expose that to developers.
When you think about microservices, though, if they're being used properly, as soon as that microservice goes out, everybody's using it, even if they don't know it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, we are 2 minutes over time. We can continue the discussion. I don't want to interrupt, but just to let everyone know, we are like the meeting is normally over and the next meeting will be 12th of November. So anyone wants to stick around, we can continue. Just say that. And thanks for joining. Yeah, James, sorry for interrupting.
So we almost have like a two tracks. We have one that's a monolith and one's a microservice, because microservice kind of disrupts that. And that's the beauty and the complexity of a microservice. It says, oh, you're using it, but you don't even know you have a new version of your application out there. And the other one is, hey, you really need this, but are you going to pay attention to it?
Well, on the monolith side, you have to, if there's a security fix, you have to go and recompile and bring in, let's say we have log4j has some security fix in it that you have to go and rebuild at the CI level, even though your source code may not have changed to bring that new library in. At the microservice level, you're going to have to do, more than likely, you have to rebuild the container. If it's like a node, you know, if it's a sub dependency at that level to bring it in, because the containers typically don't bring in, you know, packages on the fly, or they shouldn't.
Once that container is built and it's sent out there, anybody who's using that microservice gets the fix.
if they're using latest and they're not using a specific version, which is another thing, by the way.
That is a
Yeah.
that is a whole different.
Never use latest. Never use
If it
latest. That's
never
a terrible idea.
Well, no, actually, it's the right way to do it. To be quite honest, it is. It's just having the visibility to know what your application is consuming. Because if we don't do that, and I talk about this a lot, we are going right down the same road as we did with object-oriented programming, where everybody had their own version of a reusable library and they renamed it so that they were forced to use a certain version, and they never got the upgrades. Microservices, you create a lot of sprawl when you do that, and a lot of you create a pretty tangled hairball.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Here at Verizon Media, we have this mandate that even for your bare metal operating system, you have to upgrade like every 3 months. You cannot have a stale version running on your systems because that's where ultimately an attacker can get in. So we have this mandate from our security teams, like even your OS needs to be upgraded like every 3 months. You cannot just pin to one thing and run like for years and just forget about it. Else you will get like security tickets or opened against you.
I've heard of a few banks having similar things, that like a VM can't last more than a week because they think if you recreate a VM, it's more likely to have all the security fixes in it, rather than keeping around an old image of something that 3 months ago was secure, but
well, you go to the other extreme is where you're building and pulling latest, let's say Python packages or Node.js packages that you all of a sudden are introduced some weird thing, even though your source code hasn't changed. But that seems to be fewer and far between than the other way, where we're missing security fixes instead of introducing bugs.
So I do have to jump off. I told Steve he was supposed to do a demo today. He's probably very happy that he's not, because he wasn't really prepared. But we do want to do one for next week, so if we can get on the schedule for the next 2 weeks, if there's room.
It was added for the 12th.
Okay, and the question I would have for this group is there's a lot of features in Ortelius. We have a lot of features that integrate, like we have already built-in integrations with things like Jenkins, for example, that we could show. But the discussion that we've been having around this topic, as well as the topic of having the manifest topic, would that be of more interest? What road should we go down for you? We named the company Deploy Hub because not that we do deployments, but we are a hub of deployment information, so you can always repeat a deployment. And anybody can then do the deployment like Helm, or we could pass it off to Spinnaker for that matter. So I'm wondering what you guys would like to see.
That sounds quite interesting. I think integrations are cool, but seeing that side of it, I think would be really quite interesting from my point of view.
Okay.
I would prefer to see the manifest related features that you have.
Okay. So we'll focus on that, and we'll focus on the visibility that we're bringing into the CD pipeline, regardless of what CD tool you're using. So all of the impact analysis and the what we call bomb maps, and how we track the application and how we create that hermetic kind of deployment process. All right, gentlemen, it was great. It was a great discussion. This is a great, I think this interoperability team is tackling some very interesting topics. So I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thanks for joining. And I will ping you, Tracy and Steve, before the meeting, so we sync for the presentation, like 5th of November or something.
Okay.
That works.
Sounds good.
Thanks all for joining. As noted, 12th of November is the next meeting, and I put the link to the meeting minutes for the metadata HackMD document, and I will send a separate mail pointing to the same link, so you can just start putting your thoughts there and continue collaborating. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Nice evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.